All right, let's talk about loot rewards in M+. So yesterday I made a video talking about the dungeon scaling up to 18 and kind of what that was going to mean for general players. I made a tweet today and I saw some discourse, and basically I made the tweet. It said M+ only players should have access to top eye level loot. I believe that this is one of the most important issues that currently impacts M+ only players, and as a subset of players that is constantly getting larger. There are more and more M+ only players starting to play the game or continuing to play the game. I think that it is very important that M+ only players should have access to top tier loot. So let's kind of talk about what that means. Let's explore some options where what some possible and potential solutions, and kind of explore what the issue fundamentally is with it. So kind of circling back where this tweet originated from. Basically, what we saw yesterday is that Blizzard, at least according to data mining, have rewards that scale up to plus 18. This is actually a fairly positive thing. The Great Vault rewards are scaling higher. The End of Dungeon rewards are also scaling higher. We don't know anything about where Valor is going to end up landing and kind of like where the gear is going to end up with that. We don't even know if Valor's coming back. I suspect there's going to be a massive post in regards to what M+ dungeon gearing looks like soonish, and so I'm really interested to hear like what that's going to look like. But we do, at least according to data mining, assume that the Great Vault is going to be giving close to Mythic raid equivalent loot, but only for half the raid. The other half of the raid is higher item level, and then the End of Dungeon rewards are basically heroic equivalent, like not even like the end of heroic, the beginning of heroic equivalent. So kind of similar to what we have currently, slightly better. I will say slightly better. And in addition to that, with the dinar system kind of going away, maybe we see like a change in the dinar system in some variable capacity. But with that kind of going away, there should be a lower threshold between top geared raiders and people who only do M+. At the same point, that delta, at least in my opinion, is still too high. So let's talk about like the crux of the issue. At the end of the day, M+ players have no way of getting high item level loot outside of the Great Vault once a week. Obviously, Mythic Raiders they're going to have somewhere in the order of like somewhere between like 4 and 7 item levels ahead of where where like M+ only players are. So with this 418 piece, I believe the Mythic item level is 424, coming out of coming off the last couple of bosses, and so that is a 6 item level disparity just at its core. In addition to that, raiders are also getting loot from the Great Vault. So you're like, if you do not do any raid in any capacity, you're likely going to be getting half a piece to a full piece of loot less per week on average, assuming that there is no trading or gear funneling to you. And so this is fundamentally going to be an issue. In addition to that, it's very difficult for you as an M+ only player to target specific loot that you need. And you know that even on like, I've seen screenshots on week 3 and week 4 where people are getting loot options and they're doing 3 boxes of their vault, or they're potentially even doing 6 boxes of their vault. And those aren't upgrades. And I think that in like week 3 and week 4, if you're not getting an upgrade in the vault, there's something wrong with the vault as well. That is a fundamental issue with how this works. So this now that I've kind of explained the problem, M+ players should have access to top item level loot. And what I mean when I say this is the ability to be able to get top item level loot is a major problem for M+ only players. And put a major asterisk on this, in a reasonable time frame, because right now if you do M+ only, you can't realistically get top item level loot throughout the whole entire season. And in addition to that, you're just praying that the vault drops something that's good for you, because you can't really control what the vault is going to give. Now, problems I see with the M+ system is the End of Dungeon rewards. So let's talk about the issues with the M+ system. Is that it's spammable. And so this is the issue that I see a lot of players contest with End of Dungeon rewards, is that, or with M+ in particular, is that oh, they don't want M plus to be the only source of loot. They believe that the end of dungeon rewards are already too powerful. And so buffing those up in any capacity is going to create even more friction with the player base. I actually kind of agree. I think that end of dungeon rewards are far too strong. And especially, I wish I had this pulled up, especially with the changes now to where heroic, with normal, heroic, and mythic raid all coming out at the same time. Mythic plus is uncapped item level for what dungeon level you can do. And so now M plus and end of dungeon rewards are already so valuable early on in the season, and then they fall off so heavily on weeks like 3, 4, 5. And so there is like, hold on, let me pull up MS Paint like I'm Dratnos for a second. There is a graph where if you have mythic dungeon loot here, it starts off, and this dungeon loot is really good, right? So let's say it starts here, and then this is like week 2 here, and it starts going down, and this is like week 3, and then week 4, and then end of dungeon rewards are basically worthless by like week 5. And you don't really care about end of dungeon rewards by like week 5 of the patch being out in any meaningful capacity. And so this is a major issue. I think that end of dungeon rewards are just too strong. And so I think that Blizzard should be looking to completely rework how Mythic Plus players get loot. So there were a couple of really interesting opinions that were thrown out on this tweet thread, and I think that we can explore some of them and kind of think about what they mean. First off, THD actually raises a very interesting point where he talks about bringing back Titanforging, but his version of this is bring back Titanforging only for M+, with the max raid item level and no Titanforging inside of raid. I think that this would be fairly interesting. At the same point, this kind of runs into the same issue where end of dungeon rewards are still a little bit too strong. At the same vein, like M+, like you don't get a lot of loot from end of dungeon rewards as it currently stands. Even if you're doing a 20, you're only getting 3 pieces of loot. Whereas in Legion, whenever this was current, if you timed to 20, you would get 6 pieces of loot guaranteed. If you timed to 25, you would get 7. And so there are issues. If they brought back Titanforging, they could up the amount of loot that you're gaining. I do think that it would be an interesting avenue to consider, especially in that regard. It would make end of dungeon rewards more viable for long-term farming. It would make it more viable for targeted acquisition of higher item level pieces for M+ only players, and it would kind of reward your time in a way that you kind of saw there were issues with, where this is like week 5. It would allow you to actually have some scalability where it would end up being a little bit better past week 5. And so I do think that bringing back Titanforging could be a potential option. It's not my preferred option. Let's talk about my preferred option. I think that Veneruki actually says it best here. I think that this to me makes the most sense. I think that converting it to a system where M+ item level gear is similar to how PvP gear works, where if you want to only do M+, you have the gear to do so. And so basically how this works is if you have an arena, the gear that you get from like the arena vendor has like let's say a plus 20 item level modifier on it. And so let's say that the gear is actually appearing at 402 item level. Let's just use this for an example. Okay, so let's say that the gear is appearing at this 402 item level, and then with the pseudo PvP modifier on it, you add, okay, just to have it consistent with Mythic Raid, you could add 22 item levels to it to put it at 424. I'm thinking a little bit higher. I'm thinking like you add 28 item levels to the Mythic Plus rewards at that point and bump it up to 430. That way, if you're a Mythic Raider, you can still be competitive in M+. There's still probably going to be some things that are like slightly better, potentially like trinkets and things like that. There's also some 430 pieces from the raid itself. Like they put like really random unique items. There's like a fire damage ring. I don't really want to explain that, but like there are some 430 item level pieces from the raid itself, so I think there is precedence. But you put like a plus 28 modifier on the end of dungeon loot. There is some gear that you can get from the Great Vault, but it also caps out only at that 430 item level mark. But that would allow you to get like the 418s to where you can be competitive in some variable capacity inside of raid. And then if you only want to do M+, you have the gear and the ability to be able to do so. I do think that there are some issues with this system. I don't know exactly where it is. This is actually a major contentious point with this. As someone who plays a druid and is flexible in all specs, this only creates more problems. I'll have a raid set, a PvP set, an M+ set, puke emoji, 3 sets of gear, 4 specs to play with, obviously with some overlap, but the main thing is stat weights and trinkets, 18 slots of gear, no thank you. I think that there is some issues with that in particular, but at the same point, I think that something has to change with M+ gearing in particular. I actually don't mind this going up to 18, and I wouldn't mind seeing M+ loot scale even higher, even to like the 20 range. But at the same point, whenever you think about that, you have to factor in so 18s at the beginning of an expansion are always hard. Just looking at historical precedents, they've always been so hard. And then if you look at 18s right now, people are doing 34s on live. People did 38 junkyards in TGP, obviously, or 37 junkyard in TGP. People did a 34 streets on live, not even just in TGP, a 34. And so there is some like loss of dungeon level scaling across the entire season, but I think that Blizzard should more aggressively not really allow people to push past 30. I think that like that 27, 28 range should be like the upper bound, and then you allow players to do all the way up to like 20 to be able to get higher end of dungeon rewards, and then you get like slightly better Great Vault options, maybe not exactly the 424s. Well, maybe you probably even could. If a 20 is hard, you could actually allow them to get a 424 out of that. I don't see the issue. But then in addition to that, you always are going to want to wear M+ gear for M+. And I think that that's like a pretty big point that I'm trying to make, is like if that happens and then you only want to wear M+ gear for M+, like you're going to have multiple sets, which can kind of suck. But at the same point, you're never going to feel like you are a massive amount behind. At the same point, even if you are wearing this end of dungeon reward gear, as long as it's like scaling up and you're equivalent with just like, say this scaled up to 424, and say that like they bumped this all the way up to +20, and then the +20 stuff dropped 406 gear or 408 gear, and that got all the way bumped up to 430, and so then you're incentivized to it bumped up to 430 only in M+, then you would be incentivized to do +20s, and you could also feel like you're getting some item level gains. You are getting some item level gains on your stat sheet, you're getting some better Great Vault option, but in addition to that, you don't feel like you're super behind in M+. And so I think that for me, M+ needs a major revamp. I don't even know if this is the best option. But I do think that Blizzard needs to do something for the M+ only players. They are very underrepresented in regards to like how gearing is accessible for them right now, and I think it is something that absolutely needs to change from Blizzard's end. All right, I'm interested to hear your thoughts down in the comments. I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.